It was late in the evening on a quiet street in Mexico, the kind of street where the warm orange glow of dim street lamps barely reached the cracked sidewalks. Most shops had already closed, the air carried the faint smell of roasted corn from a distant vendor, and the city felt unusually calm. On an old wooden bench near a small park, Steven Seagal sat alone, his posture relaxed, his eyes half closed as if he were simply resting after a long day. There was nothing about him that suggested he was a world-renowned martial artist or the kind of man who had faced danger more times than most could imagine. He looked like just another traveler seeking a quiet moment. But trouble was never too far. A few meters away, three shadowy figures turned the corner, moving slowly, confidently, the way street predators move when they're already certain of their victory. Their laughter echoed faintly through the empty street, low and mocking. From a distance, they spotted Seagal sitting alone, unguarded, unaware. To them, he didn't look like a threat. He looked like an opportunity. One of the thugs nudged the other with his elbow. "That guy looks loaded," he whispered in Spanish. "Or stupid," the second one replied. "Either way," the third smirked, "tonight's our lucky night." They began walking toward him, their steps growing heavier, more deliberate. Seagal didn't move. He didn't even bother to lift his head. His breathing remained steady, his hands resting calmly on his knees, completely unaware, or so it seemed. The thugs drew closer, now only a few steps away. Their shadows stretched long on the pavement as they blocked the streetlight above him. The atmosphere thickened, and the peaceful silence of the night shifted into something tense, something dangerous. One of them spoke first. "Hey viejo," he said sharply, "this bench is taken." Still, Seagal didn't look up. His calmness irritated them. They weren't expecting someone who didn't flinch. Another thug stepped forward, cracking his knuckles loudly. "Get up," he demanded. "We told you to move." Seagal finally lifted his eyes, slowly, deliberately. Not scared. Not angry. Just watching. No one there, not even the thugs themselves, had any idea that in just a few moments everything about this night would change forever. The tension in the air thickened as the three Mexican thugs stepped closer to the bench, circling Steven Seagal like wolves testing their prey. The quiet street that felt peaceful just minutes ago now carried a different energy, sharp, unsettling, and heavy with bad intentions. The tallest thug, wearing a red bandana and tattoos down both forearms, leaned in first. His eyes scanned Seagal from head to toe. "What are you, old man?" he sneered. "Tourist? Drunk? Or just stupid enough to sit here alone?" His voice was loud, deliberately aggressive. He wanted fear. He expected fear. But Seagal didn't give him anything. Seagal slowly blinked, as if he hadn't even processed the insult. His calmness wasn't planned, it was simply who he was. A lifetime of discipline had carved patience into him like stone. He'd faced armed men, raging fighters, broken bones, and life-or-death brawls. Three thugs on a quiet street didn't even register as a threat. But they didn't know that. The second thug, shorter but broad and stocky, stepped forward and slapped the bench near Seagal's shoulder, hard enough to send a loud crack through the empty street. "Hey!" he barked. "Didn't you hear my friend talking to you?" Still no reaction. The third thug, the youngest of the group, laughed under his breath. "Maybe he doesn't speak Spanish," he joked. "Or maybe he wants to get robbed." The first thug spat on the ground beside Seagal's boot. "Well, then let's give him what he wants." The men exchanged signals. These weren't amateurs, they had done this before. The circle narrowed. The intimidation thickened. Still, the man on the bench didn't move an inch. What bothered them wasn't his silence. It was his complete lack of fear. People who get cornered normally panic. They shake. Their breathing changes. Their eyes dart around. They plead, argue, or try to escape. But Seagal sat like a mountain, steady, unshaken, immovable. And that began to irritate them even more. "Look at his face," the stocky thug muttered. "He thinks he's better than us." The leader smirked. "Let's see how long that attitude lasts." He reached out and grabbed Seagal's collar with a sudden jerk. Still, no reaction. Seagal's head tilted only slightly from the pull, but he didn't tense up. He didn't posture. He didn't try to break free. His stillness confused them. It wasn't the stillness of fear, it was the stillness of someone who didn't consider them a threat worth engaging. "Get up." The leader's voice dropped to a colder tone. "I said, get up." Finally, Seagal looked up. His eyes were slow, unblinking, almost bored. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't mocking. It was simply observation, as if he were analyzing three children playing a dangerous game. The leader felt a chill travel down his spine, but he pushed the feeling away. "What are you staring at?" he snapped. Seagal didn't respond. Silence, again. And now, that silence wasn't irritating. It was frightening. The younger thug, anxious from the unexpected calmness, stepped behind Seagal as if preparing to yank him off the bench. "Maybe we should just check his pockets," he muttered. The leader nodded. "Yeah. Let's make it fast." They moved closer, tightening the circle until Seagal was fully boxed in. 3 men, 3 angles, no escape. Or so they thought. Right then, a faint noise echoed from a nearby street, a car passing, a dog barking, a door shutting. It created a brief moment of distraction, and in that distraction, the thug's confidence grew. "He's alone," the stocky thug whispered. "No cops around. No one's gonna help him. No cameras." They didn't realize something important. They weren't the hunters. They were approaching the one man they should never, ever corner. But to them, he was just another traveler. Just another unlucky soul. The leader tightened his grip on Seagal's collar again. "We're not asking again," he growled. "Stand up." Seagal remained still. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Fine," he said. "We'll make you stand." He raised his other hand, ready to shove Seagal off the bench. Just then, Seagal spoke for the first time. Very quietly. Very calmly. "You don't want to do that." The thugs froze for a split second. His voice wasn't scared. It wasn't angry. It wasn't weak. It was warning. A kind of warning you only hear from someone who has nothing to prove, but everything under control. "What did you say?" The leader leaned in. Seagal slowly repeated, "I said, you don't want to do that." Before they could respond, the streetlight above them flickered. The shadows shifted. A small breeze picked up, rustling leaves across the pavement. The sense of danger grew thicker, almost visible. The stocky thug swallowed. "Man, something's off about him." The leader pushed the fear down again. "He's just bluffing." From the corner of his eye, the younger thug suddenly noticed a couple of passers-by watching from across the street, even pulling out phones. People could sense something was about to happen. The thugs didn't care. They had their pride on the line now. The leader tightened his fist, ready to land the first hit. The hit that would ignite the entire storm. Before things explode, tell me in the comments. Which city or country are you watching from? Let's see how far this story is reaching. With the tension at its peak, the leader pulled back his arm, unaware that the moment he swung, the entire night would take a turn no one could ever forget. The leader's arm swung forward, a rush of adrenaline making every step feel heavier, every shadow sharper. He expected a flinch, a yell, maybe even a weak attempt at resistance. But Seagal didn't move. Not a muscle. Not even an eye twitch. His calm stare fixed on the thug, unyielding, almost as if he had already calculated every possible outcome before the fight even began. The young thug, emboldened by the leader's action, lunged first, aiming a punch straight at Seagal's shoulder. It should have been simple, an easy hit. But Seagal's body reacted with a speed and precision that stunned anyone watching. With a subtle twist of his wrist, he redirected the thug's momentum, sending him stumbling forward, crashing onto the cracked pavement with a loud thud. The stocky thug froze mid-step, jaws tight. He didn't know whether to laugh, run, or attack. The leader's eyes widened in shock. That punch had been perfectly timed, not brute force, but controlled, surgical, and humiliating. The young thug groaned on the ground, clutching his shoulder, while the other two stared at Seagal like they'd just seen something supernatural. Seagal finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You think you're in control. You're not." The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Authority. Power. A quiet warning that needed no further explanation. The thugs exchanged nervous glances. "Did he just what?" whispered the youngest, voice shaky. "Forget it," muttered the stocky one. "He's just lucky, ignore it." But luck had nothing to do with it. The leader advanced again, fists raised. This time, he was determined. He aimed a sweeping punch toward Seagal's torso, trying to assert dominance, trying to prove he was still the alpha. But again, Seagal was ready. His movements were economical, precise, almost invisible to the untrained eye. With a subtle pivot, he deflected the punch, grabbed the leader's arm, and used the thug's own momentum to send him sprawling backward into a trash bin. The street was silent for a moment. Even the wind seemed to pause. The thugs had never seen anything like this. Their arrogance had crumbled in mere seconds, replaced with confusion, fear, and an unspoken realization they were no match for this man. The youngest thug trembled, trying to retreat, but Seagal's gaze locked onto him. "Stop. No." His voice was calm but deadly, the kind of voice that doesn't raise alarm but commands obedience. They froze. Not because they respected him, but because instinctively they understood the consequences of ignoring him. And in that moment, Seagal made his first strategic move. Not an attack meant to harm, but a display of control. A single, precise step, a slight adjustment in his stance, and the youngest thug found himself on the ground again, held in place by Seagal's leverage. No broken bones, no unnecessary force, just a reminder that every move, every gesture, belonged to the man on the bench. A passerby from across the street gasped and pulled out their phone. Another whispered to a friend, pointing, "Did you see that?" The street that was moments ago quiet and dangerous had turned into a stage where a master quietly demonstrated his dominance. Quick, if you were in this moment, what would you do? Comment below. Would you stay calm like Seagal or try to fight back like the thugs? The stocky thug and the leader, now fully realizing their mistake, attempted to coordinate a group attack. But Seagal's awareness was unmatched. Every angle, every approach, every escape route was already accounted for in his mind. He shifted his body just enough to intercept, neutralize, and control all three at once, moving with a grace that was frightening in its efficiency. It wasn't overkill. It wasn't rage. It was control, precision, discipline, the kind of mastery that comes from decades of training, experience, and life-or-death encounters. The thugs were no longer a threat. They were obstacles in a demonstration of skill. Their initial confidence had evaporated, replaced with panic, confusion, and the dawning realization that they had seriously underestimated the man sitting quietly on a street bench. Every slight movement, every small correction, reinforced Seagal's dominance without cruelty. The gang leader finally froze, lips parted, eyes wide. He could see the pattern. Each thug had been outmaneuvered before they even realized it. Their plan had failed completely in less than a minute. Seagal remained calm, almost serene, as the thugs realized their powerlessness. In this moment, it was no longer a street attack. It was a masterclass in control, awareness, and the terrifying effectiveness of a trained martial artist who chooses restraint over violence. And the lesson was clear: Underestimate him at your own peril. The street had fallen into a tense, almost surreal silence. Only the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog punctuated the night air. The three Mexican thugs, who had come here with arrogance and menace, now stood frozen. Fear and confusion replaced their previous bravado. Each of them realized, too late, that they had miscalculated the man on the bench. Steven Seagal remained seated, calm and almost meditative, his eyes scanning every movement, every microshift in their posture. He didn't rise unnecessarily. He didn't shout or taunt. He didn't need to. The way he moved, even minimally, radiated authority. He had the thugs completely within his control. The youngest thug, who had tried the first attack, now shook like a leaf, backing away slightly. His eyes darted between Seagal's unmoving face and his companions, silently pleading for some kind of escape plan. But there was none. Seagal had already mentally calculated every possibility. The stocky thug, arms slightly trembling, took a cautious step forward, as if testing the waters. He raised his fist slightly, but it was no longer confident. It was reactive. And reactive behavior in front of someone like Seagal was dangerous. One wrong step, one misjudged move, and the night would end very differently for him. Seagal shifted his weight just slightly, pivoting on the bench with smooth precision. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. The stocky thug stumbled forward, unbalanced, caught completely off guard by the minimal movement that had shifted his center of gravity. In a single, fluid motion, Seagal grabbed his arm, rotated him, and guided him gently to the ground. The thug landed with a heavy thud, groaning in shock, but unharmed. The leader stepped forward, now desperate. "Get up!" he barked, trying to mask his fear. "We're not done." Seagal's eyes locked on him, unblinking, commanding, and calm. "Sit down," he said quietly. Not a demand shouted in anger, not a threat. Just words, spoken with authority that didn't require force. The leader paused, surprised at the power in the calm voice. Every instinct in his body screamed to retreat, but pride anchored him in place. The next moment, Seagal moved again, rising smoothly from the bench, his body a blur of controlled energy. He didn't rush. He didn't flail. Every movement was precise, minimal, and devastating in effect. The youngest thug tried to escape, sprinting toward the edge of the street. But Seagal anticipated the movement, stepping just enough to intercept him. With a single fluid motion, he deflected the thug's momentum, guiding him to the ground with barely any effort. The thug landed on his knees, wide-eyed, completely frozen. By now, the crowd of onlookers had begun to whisper and point, some recording on their phones. What had started as a terrifying street attack had transformed into a display of sheer mastery. Passers-by felt the tension, the power, and the calm inevitability radiating from Seagal. He was no longer just a man defending himself. He was the eye of a storm, controlling everything without excess, without cruelty. The leader, now alone in his defiance, tried one more desperate move. He lunged forward with a knife he had concealed. His eyes burned with panic, adrenaline, and the arrogance that had brought him here. But Seagal didn't panic. He didn't react violently. Instead, he executed a perfect disarm. With a single, controlled motion, he twisted the knife from the leader's hand, guiding it safely away and positioning himself between the thug and the weapon. The street went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The gang realized what they were facing, not just a fighter, but a master, someone who could end the situation at any time, yet chose restraint. Seagal didn't gloat. He didn't shout. He didn't even flex. His calmness, his mastery of every moment, left a heavier impression than any blow could. And that's when the first thug, still on the ground, whispered to the others in fear and awe, This isn't just a man. This is something else." It was more than skill. It was control, presence, and wisdom. And the street, once full of threats and fear, now reflected only one undeniable truth. Seagal was the master of this encounter. What would you do if you saw someone handling a dangerous situation this calmly? Comment below. Would you have the courage to stay calm like Seagal? The remaining thugs, seeing all three of their members incapacitated and disarmed, finally realized they had no path to victory. They froze, shame and fear mixing with disbelief. The street that had seemed like their hunting ground was now a stage on which their weakness had been exposed. Seagal stood tall, calm, collected, a man who could have easily hurt them but chose the most powerful method of all, complete control without unnecessary violence. The lesson was clear. The night wasn't just his defense. It was a demonstration of precision, wisdom, and the unshakable confidence of a true master. The street seemed frozen in time. The three thugs, once filled with arrogance, now trembled before the calm, unyielding presence of Steven Seagal. The youngest and stockiest of the trio were already subdued, their confidence shattered, sprawled awkwardly on the cracked pavement. Only the leader remained standing, gripping the knife tightly in his hand, his breathing heavy and uneven. Pride and panic warred inside him. He wanted to regain control, but instinct screamed that he was outmatched. He stepped forward, chest puffed, eyes darting between his comrades and Seagal. I'll finish this," he muttered, voice quivering but trying to mask the fear. "I'm not afraid of you." Seagal's gaze didn't waver. Calm, steady, almost serene, it pierced through the night, through the adrenaline, through the leader's false bravado. He made no sudden movements, no aggressive steps, no threats. His presence alone carried more power than any weapon the thug could muster. The leader lunged forward suddenly, knife raised high, a desperate strike aimed at asserting dominance and reclaiming his pride. But Seagal was ready. His body moved with fluidity born from decades of discipline, every step minimal, precise, and controlled. In a single motion, he intercepted the knife, twisting it from the thug's grasp as if it weighed nothing, guiding it safely out of harm's way. The blade clattered harmlessly onto the pavement. Time seemed to stretch. The thug froze, eyes wide, disbelief painted across his face. He had expected resistance, maybe a fight, but not this. Not calm mastery. Not control without cruelty. He realized in that instant that he had been outclassed in every sense. Seagal stepped closer, voice quiet but carrying the weight of authority. "Violence will destroy your life. The path you are on will only lead to regret." The words hit the thug like a physical blow. There was no yelling, no humiliation, no anger. Just truth. And in that moment, the leader's chest tightened. He wasn't just facing a fighter. He was facing a man who had lived, who had survived, who had mastered himself. The lesson was unavoidable. The youngest thug, still kneeling, whispered to the stocky one, He's not joking. We can't fight him." Their faces were pale, adrenaline still high, but the fear in their eyes spoke volumes. They had come to harm, to intimidate, to assert dominance, but now they were powerless. Seagal took another step, closing the distance, yet still controlled. "You have a choice," he said. "Walk away. Learn. Live better. Or continue this path, and it will only end in pain." The leader's grip on the knife slackened. Pride warred with reason. For the first time in the encounter, he realized that his desperation had blinded him. He dropped the knife, letting it clatter on the pavement. The sound echoed loudly in the empty street, a symbol of surrender and understanding. Seagal didn't smile. He didn't mock. He simply watched, letting the lesson settle in. The three men, humbled and shaken, backed away slowly, their eyes still fixed on him. Their earlier aggression had completely dissolved into respect mixed with fear. They didn't know if they would ever encounter such control again in their lives. From the sidewalk, a passerby recorded the moment on their phone, whispering to a friend, "Did you see that? He didn't even hurt them, but he completely dominated." The leader finally muttered, voice barely audible, we won't forget this. Seagal nodded subtly, a simple gesture, signaling that the lesson had been learned. And in that quiet acknowledgement, the night itself seemed to exhale. The tension that had gripped the street dissipated. The air felt lighter, the danger removed, the lesson delivered. This wasn't just a fight. It was a demonstration of mastery, of control, of restraint. Seagal had faced aggression, fear, and potential violence, yet he had responded in a way that transformed the encounter entirely. He didn't just defend himself, he taught, he guided, he changed lives in a single moment. The three thugs retreated down the street, walking slowly, heads down, a mix of awe, fear, and regret following every step. The street bench, once a place of potential violence, now stood as a silent witness to the power of calm, precision, and wisdom. And for anyone watching, from the shadows, from across the street, or later online, the lesson was clear. True strength isn't in brute force, but in knowing how, when, and why to act. The street was now quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. The three Mexican thugs who had stormed the bench just moments ago now stood frozen, the adrenaline fading into a chilling realization they had been completely outmatched. Fear, shame, and regret mingled across their faces, a cocktail far more powerful than any weapon they had brought. The youngest thug, still trembling, leaned on the wall for support, staring at the pavement as if it held the answers to his mistakes. The stocky thug rubbed his jaw, teeth clenched, replaying every movement in his mind. The subtle wrist twists, the calm precision, the effortless control Seagal had wielded. He had come expecting a fight he could win, yet now, he understood that arrogance and force were no match for mastery and discipline. The leader, once full of confidence, now gripped the knife loosely in his hand before finally letting it drop. Every instinct in his body screamed to flee, but pride and the raw weight of what had just happened rooted him to the spot. He had thought himself a predator, but in reality, he had been the prey all along. His eyes followed Seagal with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and something deeper, a grudging respect. Seagal didn't advance. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been delivered. Every movement, every word, every subtle command had made the point clear. Aggression without awareness leads only to defeat. He took a slow step back, allowing the thugs the space to process their mistakes, to regain what little composure they could. From the sidewalk, bystanders began to whisper. A woman with a stroller muttered under her breath, Did he just neutralize them without really hitting them?" A young man filming with his phone shook his head, unable to comprehend the quiet control he had just witnessed. People who had initially feared for Seagal's safety now looked on in astonishment, their eyes wide with admiration and disbelief. The youngest thug finally spoke, voice trembling. We didn't know," he trailed off, unable to form the words that could explain what had just happened. The stocky thug added, He didn't even hurt us. And yet, he's untouchable." Even the leader, now standing a few steps behind the others, finally spoke, his tone subdued and reflective. We were wrong. Completely wrong. This isn't a fight you can win. Not like that. Not against him." Seagal's expression remained calm, almost meditative. There was no gloating, no satisfaction. Just awareness, the kind of awareness that comes from someone who has walked through life's most dangerous situations and emerged unshakable. The street had become a stage for a different kind of victory. The thugs were not physically harmed, but their arrogance had been dismantled completely. Every passerby who had witnessed the scene understood it. True power wasn't shown through cruelty or aggression, but through precision, restraint, and the ability to remain unshaken under pressure. Some people pulled out their phones, recording the thugs' retreating figures and Seagal's calm presence. Whispers turned into quiet conversations. "Did you see that? I can't believe he didn't even really fight them. That man, he's something else." The leader, now glancing at the retreating figures of his own gang, finally nodded to himself. He had learned a lesson he would not forget, one that would haunt him in the months to come. Fear mixed with understanding, regret tempered by survival instinct. This night would be replayed in his mind endlessly. Meanwhile, Seagal walked slowly to the bench and sat down once more. The calmness he radiated was contagious. Even the bystanders, initially frozen in awe, began to relax. The tension that had gripped the street dissipated. Have you ever seen someone handle a life-threatening situation with such calm and precision? Comment below. What would you have done if you were in Seagal's place? The street was still quiet, but the energy had changed. Those who had intended to intimidate had instead been humbled. Those who had feared violence now understood the true meaning of mastery and self-control. And for the first time that night, the street felt safe, not because danger had vanished, but because wisdom and skill had taken its place. As the thugs disappeared into the shadows, retreating from a lesson they had never expected, the bystanders began to whisper stories to each other. Phones recorded, videos captured, and quietly, the story began to spread. What had started as a local street encounter was fast becoming something bigger, something the world would soon see. Seagal remained seated, calm and observant. The night was quiet again, but it had changed. Everyone who had witnessed it knew they had seen something extraordinary. Not just a fight, but a demonstration of skill, awareness, and control that left an indelible impression. This was more than an attack. By the time the three thugs had vanished into the shadows, the quiet street had transformed into a stage of awe and admiration. Passers-by, who had at first only watched cautiously from across the road, now whispered to each other in disbelief. Phones were out, videos recorded, and snippets of the encounter began circulating almost instantly among the small crowd. The scene that had lasted only a few minutes seemed far longer to those who had witnessed it. The precision, the calm, the complete control that Steven Seagal had maintained left them speechless. "Did you see that?" a young man asked, replaying a clip on his phone. He didn't even hurt them, but he completely dominated the situation. A woman with a stroller nodded, her eyes wide. "It's terrifying and incredible. He's not just defending himself, he's teaching them a lesson." The moment's impact didn't stay confined to the street. As the videos were shared online, social media quickly picked up on what had happened. Clips of Seagal neutralizing three armed men without causing unnecessary harm began going viral. Comments poured in from across the world. People were amazed by his calmness, precision, and ability to control a dangerous encounter without cruelty. "Absolute masterclass in self-control," read one comment. "Steven Seagal just taught the world how to handle violence," said another. "Unbelievable! That's discipline, skill, and wisdom rolled into one." News outlets began reporting the story within hours. Headlines read, "Legendary actor defuses armed attack without lifting a fist. Steven Seagal turns the tables on street thugs in Mexico. Mastery over violence, the bench incident that shocked everyone." The world watched in fascination. But what truly captured attention wasn't just Seagal's martial arts prowess. It was his restraint. He didn't humiliate the attackers. He didn't gloat. He simply maintained control, neutralized the threat, and let the lesson speak for itself. People across the globe were inspired, not by a fight, but by his composure and the wisdom behind every move. The videos continued to spread, accumulating millions of views. Martial artists, self-defense enthusiasts, and ordinary viewers alike praised Seagal for demonstrating the power of calm mastery. Online forums debated the encounter endlessly. How one man, sitting quietly on a street bench, had completely disarmed a gang without causing lasting harm. Even the thugs, who were initially aggressive and arrogant, became part of the story, though anonymously. Their retreat and visible regret highlighted the lesson that violence and recklessness rarely lead to triumph when faced with awareness and control. The narrative was clear. Quick thinking, discipline, and composure are far more powerful than aggression. Seagal, in the meantime, quietly left the scene once the crowd had dispersed. There was no interview, no statement, no desire for fame. The world already knew the story. The lesson had spread faster than anyone could anticipate, inspiring millions who witnessed it online. And now, the moment had reached you. Yes, you, the viewer. You've just experienced a story of skill, courage, and self-control that shows the true power of restraint and intelligence over brute force. Like this video if you admire Seagal's composure. Comment below, what would you have done in that situation? Could you remain as calm and precise as he did? Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where quick thinking, bravery, and discipline turn dangerous moments into unforgettable lessons. Remember, the story isn't just about fighting. It's about the mindset, the control, and the ability to remain unshaken under pressure. Steven Seagal's calm mastery turned an attack into a lesson, a dangerous encounter into an inspirational moment. And now, thanks to the power of video, the world can learn from it too. The night that began with tension and threat ended with understanding, respect, and an unforgettable example of true mastery. And one thing is certain, anyone who underestimates discipline and composure will regret it, just as the thugs did that night. Seagal walked into the darkness, leaving behind a street that had witnessed more than just an altercation. It had witnessed the power of calm, skill, and wisdom. The lesson was clear, the story was shared, and the world was watching.